Have you ever found something that feels like it wasn't meant for human eyes? Not just unsettling or strange, but the kind of thing that coils around your brain and refuses to let go, whispering that you were never supposed to see it in the first place. That's what I'm dealing with right now. I should delete this before I even start. I should keep my mouth shut, pretend I never saw what I saw. But the problem is, the more I try to bury it, the louder it gets. I close my eyes at night and it's there, flickering behind my eyelids. I walk past strangers in the street and I wonder if they've seen it too, if maybe that's why they look so tired, so hollow. This, what you're hearing right now, it isn't a story I want to tell. It's more like a confession. I'm not writing this for clicks or sympathy or because I think anyone will believe me. I'm writing it because if I keep it bottled up any longer, I think it'll consume me completely. And maybe, if you hear it, you'll understand why. The thing is, if this post disappears, if my account goes dark, if my name vanishes from the comments section, you'll know why. That won't be a glitch. It won't be some accident. It'll mean they found me. Or worse, it'll mean it's already inside me. I wish I could start at the beginning, but even the beginning doesn't feel real anymore. It was ordinary, almost boring, the kind of day you don't even remember unless something shatters it. I was at the library. That's the safe part of the memory. That's the normal part. A library should feel calm, right? Rows of shelves, dust motes floating in the light, the faint hum of fluorescent bulbs. People whispering, shuffling papers, turning pages. That's how it was, completely, almost aggressively normal. And maybe that's what makes everything else so much worse. Because you don't expect to find that kind of thing there. You don't expect horror to creep out from between the shelves, disguised as something harmless, waiting for someone careless enough, or unlucky enough, to stumble across it. I was unlucky. You'll want to know what I found. You'll want to know why I'm even making this recording, why I'm risking drawing attention to myself. The truth is, I didn't find a book or a note or even something left behind in a hurry. I found something deliberate, something planted. And it wasn't just for me. I didn't realize it at the time, but the videos I'm about to tell you about, they weren't just recordings. They were invitations, warnings, maybe even traps. And if you've been paying attention to the local news, if you've noticed how many people have been disappearing lately, you might start to see the connections I can't stop seeing. I know how this sounds. Another internet creepypasta. Another bored narrator trying to string you along. But this isn't a performance. If you've ever felt that chill, that crawling certainty that you've stumbled onto something you shouldn't have, then you know what I mean when I say this. I wasn't supposed to see what was on that USB drive. And yet here I am. It started with a USB drive left on a dusty shelf. I thought it was just forgotten homework. I wish I'd left it there. That's the thing about libraries. They feel safe, neutral. Nobody expects to trip over something dangerous between shelves of dictionaries and old novels that smell like dust and age. I've been going to that library since I was a kid, back when the children's section had beanbags shaped like cartoon animals. Even now, as an adult, it's where I go when I want quiet. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the steady rhythm of people tapping at keyboards, the muted shuffle of shoes against the carpet, it's like a cocoon. That day was no different. The air smelled faintly of floor polish and paper. Someone coughed in the distance, and a pair of high school students whispered too loudly over a stack of history textbooks. Nothing unusual, everything perfectly ordinary. Except for the shelf. It was one of those neglected corners, the kind of shelf nobody bothers with anymore, outdated encyclopedias, reference guides from the 90s, a scattering of books with cracked spines. And there, tucked between two enormous volumes of an atlas nobody had touched in decades, was the USB drive. It didn't look special, just a plain black stick, no label, no keychain. The kind of thing you see everywhere, lying on desks or stuffed into drawers. I almost didn't notice it, but the way it sat there, it wasn't dropped. It wasn't wedged by accident, it was placed, carefully. I glanced around, half expecting someone to swoop in and grab it, but no one was looking. Except the librarian. She was behind the desk, staring in my direction. Not watching me directly, her eyes were fixed a little too far to the side, like she was pretending to sort returns while her gaze slid toward that corner of the room. And for just a moment, I swear, her lips tightened. Not a smile, not a frown, more like she was holding something back. I should have put the USB back right then, but curiosity is a curse. I slipped it into my pocket, trying not to think about the way the fluorescent light flickered overhead as I did. Just once, a quick stutter, but it made the whole row of shelves seem to breathe for a second, shadows stretching, then snapping back. Maybe I imagined it. I told myself it was nothing, probably just a student's lost project, or maybe someone transferring files for a group assignment. People lose things in libraries all the time. Still, as I checked out a book I didn't even want, something to justify being there, the librarian didn't meet my eyes. She scanned the book, slid it across the desk, and muttered a flat due in 2 weeks. But the way her hand trembled ever so slightly as she passed it to me made my stomach knot. I left quickly. The air outside felt too bright, too sharp, like stepping from a dream into reality. The USB weighed heavy in my pocket, far heavier than a piece of plastic had any right to. I thought about throwing it away before I even got home, dropping it in a trash can, leaving it on a bus seat, anything. But every time I touched it, the same thought surfaced. What if there's something important on here? Maybe it was evidence. Maybe it belonged to someone who desperately needed it back. Or maybe it was something worse. That idea dug its claws into me during the walk back. Every step I argued with myself. Don't open it, just toss it. Forget you ever saw it. But then another voice would whisper, what if you're meant to see it? What if leaving it behind means missing the truth? By the time I reached my door, my hands were already shaking. I slid the USB onto my desk, staring at it like it might twitch on its own. The logical part of me screamed to leave it alone, but logic never wins against obsession. I told myself I'd just check quickly, just a glance. Then I could delete it, wipe it, throw it away. But I didn't throw it away. I plugged it in when I finally opened the folder. I was surprised by how ordinary it looked. A handful of video files, each labeled only with dates. No titles, no context, just timestamps like raw surveillance footage. The first file was the smallest, so I clicked it. The video opened to a grainy, fixed angle of what looked like a library aisle. At first, I actually laughed under my breath. After all the wait I'd given this thing on the walk home, after the librarian's strange look and the flicker of the lights, all it showed was, well, nothing. Just shelves, tables, the dim glow of overhead lamps, a place I'd been 1,000 times before. No sound, no movement, just stillness. A minute in, I almost closed it. Then a figure entered the frame. It was just someone shelving books. Average height, plain clothes, face turned away from the camera. They moved methodically, sliding a book into place, then stepping back, then reaching for another. I leaned closer, studying them, waiting for the creepy part. But nothing happened. They just kept shelving. It went on like that for 3, 4, 5 minutes. And then I noticed something. When they stepped back from the shelf, the shadows didn't move with them. The overhead lights were steady, but their shadows stretched across the floor in the wrong direction, like it belonged to someone else entirely. I squinted, leaning in, and the longer I looked, the clearer it became. The figure's shadow was a half-second behind. At first, I thought it was a glitch, bad video compression, but the longer I watched, the more it seemed intentional. And then came the loop. The figure reached for a book, placed it on the shelf, stepped back. Then, without warning, the footage jumped, not like a cut, but a reset. The same moment played again, the figure reaching for the same book, putting it in the same spot, stepping back in the same rhythm, over and over. I scrubbed back through the footage to make sure I wasn't imagining it. The timestamp didn't skip. It kept counting forward, which meant the video wasn't repeating, it was the person. That's when the chill started working its way down my spine. I told myself maybe it was staged. Some kind of performance art, captured on security cameras. But if that were true, why would anyone hide the footage on a USB drive and wedge it between dusty atlases? Why would the librarian look at me like she already knew what I'd found? Still, I might have dismissed it as weird but harmless, if not for the detail I noticed near the end. There was a reflection in the glass cabinet across from the figure. Small, faint, barely visible in the pixelated footage, but it didn't match. In the reflection, the figure wasn't facing away from the camera. They were staring directly into it. I froze, I rewound, played it again. Every time the figure in the aisle worked silently, mechanically. But in the reflection, a pale face locked eyes with the lens, unblinking. There was something I didn't notice at first, and once I did, I couldn't unsee it. I slammed my laptop shut, my pulse hammering in my ears. My apartment was silent, but it felt like the stillness of the video had followed me, stretching out the seconds. I sat there in the dark, convincing myself it had to be a trick of the light, a corrupted file, something explainable. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew that wasn't true. I should have stopped there. I should have deleted the folder, yanked the USB out and thrown it down the garbage chute. Instead, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I opened my laptop again. My hand hovered over the trackpad, sweat slicking my palm. Curiosity always wins. I clicked on the next file. I clicked the next file, half convinced it would be another loop of the same figure, another trick of shadows and reflections. I told myself I was prepared this time, that nothing on the screen could catch me off guard again. I was wrong. The video didn't open on the library. It opened on a street. Not just any street. My street. The camera was fixed at a high angle, like it was mounted to a lamppost or maybe balanced on the ledge of a window. The footage was grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. I could see the cracked sidewalk near the bus stop, the crooked no parking sign that leaned toward the gutter, and at the end of the block, my building, tall, faded brick with ivy clawing up the side. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My first thought was that this couldn't be real. Maybe someone had filmed a random street and it just happened to look like mine. But as the seconds dragged on, the truth sank in. That was my street, my building, my home. The camera didn't move, but the timestamp ticked forward. Cars passed. People walked their dogs. I even saw a delivery van double park, the driver hopping out with a package tucked under one arm. Normal, everyday life unfolding in eerie silence. And then the lens shifted. I don't mean the camera moved, it didn't. But the focus seemed to tighten, pulling my building sharper into view, and then sharper still, until I could make out my window. My window on the 3rd floor. The curtains were drawn, but I knew it was mine. The pit in my stomach told me so before my mind caught up. It wasn't just the library anymore, it was me. I ripped off my headphones and sat back, my pulse roaring in my ears. My apartment felt suddenly smaller, like the walls were closing in. My laptop screen glowed accusingly in the dark. I wanted to shut it, but I couldn't look away. "Dude, what are you watching?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was Mark, my roommate. He'd wandered out of his room, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his hair sticking up at odd angles. He looked from me to the screen, squinting. "Is that our street?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah." He leaned closer, frowning. "Where'd you get this?" I hesitated. If I told him the truth, that I'd found a USB drive shoved between dusty atlases in the library, he'd laugh, call me paranoid. But something in my expression must have stopped him, because he didn't press. Instead, he watched with me as the video ticked on. Nothing happened for a while, just the street, people passing, shadows lengthening as the sun sank. Then at 6:42 p.m. the camera zoomed again, or maybe the footage cut. I can't be sure. 1 second it was the street. The next it was my building's front door. The door opened, and I stepped out. Or at least, someone who looked exactly like me did. Mark swore under his breath, "What the hell?" I couldn't answer. I just stared as my double walked across the sidewalk, hands in pockets, head down. The same jacket I'd been wearing earlier that day. The same scuffed sneakers. Even the way he tilted his head slightly when crossing the street, it was me. But I hadn't left the apartment. I knew I hadn't. Mark turned to me, pale. "This is fake, has to be." "Yeah," I whispered, though my voice shook. "Fake." But it didn't feel fake. The video played on, showing me disappearing around the corner. Then the screen went black for a few seconds, only to return to the same angle on the street, the same stillness as before. Mark backed away. "Delete it, I'm serious. Whatever this is, it's messed up. Just wipe the drive and forget it." I should have listened. God, I should have. But the hunger was already there, gnawing at me. The same hunger that made me pick up the USB in the first place, that made me open the first file, that made me stare into the reflection in the glass until I saw what shouldn't have been there. I shook my head. No, not yet. Mark stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had, but curiosity had its claws in me, and there was no letting go. I turned back to the laptop, the next file waiting like a door I knew I shouldn't open. And I opened it anyway. The video started predicting things that hadn't happened yet. At first it was subtle. A parked car on the street one night, its headlights flickering, its engine idling. And then the next morning I'd pass by the exact same car in the exact same spot, like the footage had leaked into reality. A man dropping his coffee on the sidewalk, swearing under his breath. And the following day I'd walk past the stain on the concrete, still dark and fresh. Coincidences, maybe. That's what Mark said when I tried explaining it to him. He rolled his eyes and muttered about stress, about how I was seeing patterns in static. But deep down, I knew better. The USB wasn't just showing me the past. It was bleeding the future into the present. And the further I went into those files, the uglier it got. The third video opened with a low hiss, like static given a voice. The image was warped, as though the camera lens had been dipped in oil. At first, I thought it was another empty room, blank walls, dim light, but then something shifted in the corner. A figure. Not walking, not standing, but twitching, as if the world around them stuttered while they remained perfectly still. Their body bent in ways it shouldn't, like someone had folded them wrong and forgotten how to put them back together. Their head tilted too far back, jaw slack, mouth open wide enough that I thought their face might split. And from that open mouth came the whisper. I leaned in, straining to hear. It was faint, like a radio signal just out of range. My name. I swear it was my name. Mark wasn't in the room that time. If he had been, maybe he would have stopped me. Maybe he would have yanked the USB out and thrown it out the window. But I was alone, and the whisper was too soft, too insistent. I turned the volume up. The whisper grew clearer. Not just my name anymore, but words strung together, phrases that twisted into commands. Stay with us. Don't leave the screen. Watch until the end. I did. The figure convulsed, snapping into impossible positions, joints bending the wrong way, and then, just when the sound swelled into something like a scream, the video cut out. Not faded, not ended, cut, sharp and deliberate. I sat there staring at the black screen, my own reflection trembling in the laptop's glow. That was when I started wondering if this was more than just lost footage. What if this was part of something bigger, an experiment? A project designed to lure people in and see how far they'd go before turning away. What if each video was a test, and I was failing by pressing play? I searched the file names for clues, scrolling through the list. They weren't random. They were sequential, ordered. And buried near the bottom was one file labeled differently than the rest. Not a date, just a single word, forbidden. I didn't open it, not yet, but the moment I saw it, my stomach dropped. It felt like the videos were waiting for me to get there, leading me closer and closer to that word like moth to flame. The fourth video was worse. This one had sound from the start, muffled screams, clipped and jagged like they'd been spliced together from dozens of voices. The footage showed a hallway, narrow, claustrophobic, lined with doors. Each door shook as if something inside was clawing to get out. And then one opened. Only darkness inside, a void that seemed to swallow the camera's grainy light. The whispering came back, layered now, overlapping voices. I couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was hypnotic, almost rhythmic. And then suddenly silence. Every door stopped shaking, the hall froze, and in the center of the frame a single eye opened. Not attached to a face, not part of a body, just an eye filling the screen, blinking once before the footage collapsed into static. I tore my headphones off, my ears ringing. The timestamps, I realized, weren't lining up. One video said it was recorded months ago, but the footage showed events from that very week. Another claimed to be years old, yet it depicted cars and clothes and faces that belonged to the present, and sometimes the near future. I scrolled back down to the word I couldn't unsee, forbidden. My hand hovered over it. Every instinct told me not to. That opening it would be the point of no return. But curiosity is a parasite. It doesn't let go once it burrows in. And I knew, eventually, I was going to click it.